All right, so we're diving into some seriously cool stuff today, designing training programs that actually get results.
I'm excited to break it all down.
I always get a little overwhelmed when I hear training program design. It sounds so formal and, I don't know, corporate-y.
I get it. It can sound a little intimidating, but honestly, it's all about being intentional and thoughtful about how we learn and teach.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've got this chapter from a textbook all about human resource management and organizational development. And they keep talking about this thing called the ADDIE model.
Ah, yes, the ADDIE model. It's kind of like a secret weapon for creating training programs that hit the mark.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Is it a super complicated thing?
Not at all. It's actually a really straightforward framework.
Okay, well, lay it on me. What is this ADD model all about?
Well, ADDIE stands for Analysis, Design, Development, Implementation, and Evaluation. Basically, it's a 5-step process that guides you through creating a training program from start to finish.
So it's like a roadmap for building effective training. I like that.
Exactly. It helps you stay organized and ensures you're covering all the bases.
All right, I'm ready to hit the road. Where do we start?
First stop, analysis. This is where we figure out exactly what needs to be learned.
So not just throwing something together and hoping for the best.
Definitely not. We've got to be strategic here. What are the specific skills or knowledge gaps we're trying to address? What are the goals? And who exactly are the learners? What's their background? What do they already know? And how do they learn best?
That makes total sense. I've definitely been in some training sessions where I felt like, wait, why am I even here? This isn't relevant to me at all.
I hear you. And that's exactly what we're trying to avoid with that analysis phase. It's about making sure the training is truly aligned with the needs of the learners and the organization.
So step 1 is all about getting crystal clear on what we're trying to achieve. Got it. What comes next?
Next up is design. So once we have a solid understanding of the why and the who of our training, we can start building the blueprint.
Okay, so like the architecture of the training program, we're talking structure and layout here.
You got it. In the design phase, we define our learning objectives, choose the best ways to deliver the training, and map out the overall flow of the program.
So are we talking about like deciding whether it's going to be in person or online, that kind of thing?
Yep. We figure out the best format, instructor-led, e-learning, or maybe a blended approach. We also think about the learning activities and the kind of content that will be most engaging and effective.
That makes a lot of sense. So we analyze the needs, then we design the structure and format. What's next on our ADDIE adventure?
Development. And this is where the real magic happens.
This is where we actually create the training materials, right?
Exactly. This is where we bring the content to life. We develop all the materials we need, from presentations and handouts to videos, online modules, quizzes, and even interactive simulations.
Wow, so it's not just about textbooks and lectures anymore. It sounds like there's a lot more creativity and variety involved in developing training these days.
Absolutely. And the key here is to make sure those materials are not just informative, but engaging and easy to understand. We want people to be excited about learning, not bored to tears.
That's so important. I've definitely sat through some training sessions that felt like a total snooze fest. And I probably didn't learn a thing.
I know, right? It's like, what's the point? But with good design and engaging materials, learning can actually be fun and effective.
So we've analyzed the needs, designed the structure, and developed the content. What happens next? Do we just unleash this amazing training program on the world?
Almost. The next step is implementation, where we actually deliver the training.
Okay, so it's a go time. What does that involve?
Well, it's all about coordinating logistics, making sure the tech works smoothly if we're using any, and of course, guiding participants through the learning process.
So making sure everything runs smoothly and people actually get something out of it.
Exactly.
And then the final step, right? The moment of truth.
Evaluation. We've got to see if our training program actually did what it was supposed to do.
So did people learn what we wanted them to learn? Did they actually gain new skills? Are they applying what they learned in their work?
That's exactly it. We gather data through assessments, surveys, performance reviews, and we see if the training met those objectives we defined way back in the design phase.
So it's all about closing the loop and making sure the training actually made a difference.
That's right. And here's the cool part. The ADDIE model isn't a one-and-done deal. It's an iterative process. We can always go back, tweak things, and improve based on the feedback and data we gather.
So it's not about perfection, it's about continuous improvement.
Exactly. We're always learning and refining.
So that's the ADDIE model in a nutshell. I have to say, it's a lot less intimidating than I thought it would be. It actually seems incredibly useful.
It really is. It's a powerful framework for creating training that truly makes a difference.
But hold on, there's one more thing this chapter keeps mentioning. SMART objectives. Is this like AI for training goals or something?
Not quite, although it is pretty smart. SMART is actually an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. These 5 elements are like the building blocks of a strong, effective objective.
Okay, so basically, instead of having these vague, wishy-washy goals for our training, we create objectives that are clear, concrete, and, well, smart.
You got it. It's about making sure everyone is on the same page and knows exactly what success looks like.
I like it. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you're creating a training program on, I don't know, customer service. A week objective would be something like improve customer service skills. It's too vague. It doesn't tell you what specific skills you're trying to develop.
Right, like what does improve even mean in that context?
Exactly. Now, an SMART objective would be something like, by the end of this training, participants will be able to handle customer complaints effectively, resolving 90% of issues on the first contact.
Okay, wow, that's a huge difference. One is this fuzzy idea, and the other is like a laser beam. You know exactly what you're aiming for.
Exactly. And the thing is, these poorly written objectives aren't just a theoretical problem. They can actually be detrimental to the success of a training program.
Because if you don't know what you're trying to achieve, how can you possibly measure whether you've been successful?
Exactly. It's like trying to hit a target you can't even see. SMART objectives bring that much-needed clarity and focus to the entire training process.
This is making so much sense. So it's about setting ourselves up for success from the very beginning.
Exactly. And what's even cooler is that you can use this SMART framework for your own personal goals as well. It's not just for corporate training programs.
Oh, I like that. So if I wanted to learn how to, say, play the piano, I could use SMART objectives to break down that goal into smaller, more achievable steps.
Absolutely. Instead of saying, I want to learn to play the piano, which is super broad and kind of overwhelming, you could set a SMART objective like, by the end of the year, I want to be able to play 3 of my favorite songs on the piano.
Okay, now that feels a lot more manageable and motivating.
Right. It's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant to you, and it has a time frame. It's SMART.
I love it. So we've covered the ADDIE model, SMART objectives. Is there anything else we need to know before we move on to actually creating the training content itself?
Well, the chapter does talk about a lot of different approaches to creating engaging training materials, and I think that's a great topic to dive into next.
Sounds good to me. Let's get creative. So let's talk about making training engaging. Because, I mean, no one wants to sit through another boring lecture, right?
Totally. It's like, why even bother if people aren't actually absorbing the information?
Exactly. So how do we ditch the dullness and make training something that people actually look forward to?
This chapter has some great ideas, and it all starts with understanding that there are so many different ways to deliver training.
Okay, like what? Spill the beans.
Well, there's the classic instructor-led training.
Yeah, the traditional classroom setting, right?
Yeah.
The trainer at the front leading the session.
Yep. And that can be great for certain things, like hands-on activities or when you really need that face-to-face interaction.
I can see that. But what if you need to reach a wider audience, people who aren't all in the same location?
That's where e-learning comes in.
Ah, yes, the online learning revolution.
It's pretty amazing how much you can do with e-learning these days. You can create interactive modules, videos, quizzes, all sorts of engaging stuff.
And people can learn at their own pace, which is a huge plus.
Totally. Plus, it can be way more cost-effective, especially for larger organizations.
It seems like blended learning is becoming more and more popular, too. Is that basically a mix of instructor-led and e-learning?
You got it.
Yeah.
So you might have some online modules for the foundational stuff, and then you bring people together for in-person sessions to really dive deeper or practice applying what they've learned.
It's like getting the best of both worlds. Right? The flexibility of online learning with that human connection you get from in-person interaction.
Exactly. It recognizes that people learn in different ways, and a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't cut it.
So we've got these different delivery methods. But what about the content itself? How do we create materials that are actually engaging, not just a bunch of dry information?
Well, the chapter talks a lot about the power of visuals.
I'm all about visuals. I learn so much better when I can actually see what's being explained.
Me too. And it's not just about making things pretty. Visuals can actually make complex information easier to understand and remember.
So instead of a wall of text, we can use things like diagrams, charts, videos, even animations.
Exactly. And think about how much more engaging a training video can be compared to just reading a manual.
Oh my gosh, yes. 1,000 times yes. Videos are a game changer.
They really are. And don't underestimate the power of storytelling.
Ah, yes. Everyone loves a good story.
It's true. Weaving information into a narrative can make it so much more compelling and memorable.
So instead of just presenting facts and figures, we can create stories that illustrate those concepts and make them come alive.
Exactly. People are much more likely to remember a story than a list of bullet points.
That's so true. Okay, what about interactive elements? The chapter mentioned those too, right?
Yeah, those are super important. It's all about getting people actively involved in the learning process.
Makes sense. How do we do that?
Think quizzes, games, polls, simulations, even virtual reality experiences.
Wow, it sounds like training is getting pretty high-tech these days.
It is. And the technology is only getting better and more accessible.
So instead of passively listening to someone talk at them, learners are actually doing things, making decisions, getting feedback in real time.
Exactly. It's a much more immersive and effective way to learn.
This is so cool. Okay, so we've covered visuals, storytelling, interactive elements. What about presentations? Those are kind of unavoidable, right? Especially in a corporate setting.
Ah, yes, the dreaded PowerPoint presentation. But even those can be less painful if you know how to do them right.
Please enlighten me. I think we've all suffered through some pretty terrible presentations in our time.
The biggest mistake people make is trying to cram way too much information onto each slide.
Oh yeah, the wall of text approach.
Not good. Keep it simple, use visuals, short phrases, highlight key takeaways. No one wants to read a novel on a slide.
Less is more. It's like a design principle for presentations.
And don't forget about handouts and job aids.
So things like checklists, quick reference guides, step-by-step instructions, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's about giving people something they can take away with them and refer back to later on, long after the training is over.
So it's not just about cramming information into their heads during the training session. It's about giving them tools and resources they can actually use in their work.
You got it. It's about making the learning practical and applicable.
All of this is making me rethink my entire approach to learning.
That's great. And that's the whole point, right? To create learning experiences that are not only effective, but also enjoyable.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Different delivery methods, visuals, interactive elements, presentations, handouts. Is there anything else we need to keep in mind when creating engaging training content?
Well, I think the most important thing, the thing that ties it all together, is to always keep the learner at the center of everything. Meaning, we need to design training with the learner's needs, preferences, and goals in mind. It's not about what the trainer wants to teach, it's about what the learner needs to learn.
So it's about empathy, really. Putting ourselves in the learner's shoes and asking what would make this experience valuable and engaging for them.
Exactly. And that applies whether you're designing training for a large organization or creating a learning plan for yourself.
So even if I'm just trying to learn a new skill on my own, I should be asking myself those same questions. What are my goals? What are my preferred learning styles? What kind of resources and support would help me succeed?
Absolutely. It's about taking ownership of your learning and creating an experience that works for you.
This is so empowering. I feel like we've been given the keys to unlock a whole new world of learning possibilities.
I feel the same way, and I think it's a perfect time to bring our listeners into the conversation.
Yes. Let's make this practical.
Right.
All right, listeners, it's time to put all this amazing knowledge into action.
We've talked about the ADDIE model, SMART objectives, all those creative ways to make training engaging.
Now we want you to think about a skill you've been wanting to learn or level up.
It could be anything.
Maybe you want to learn a new language.
Or master a musical instrument.
Or finally tackle that coding course you've been putting off.
Whatever it is, we want you to imagine you're designing the perfect training program for yourself.
How would you use the ADDIE model?
What kind of SMART objectives would you set?
Would you create a self-paced online course?
Or maybe you'd prefer an immersive in-person workshop.
Or hey, maybe you blend of both.
And what about the content itself? How would you make it super engaging?
Think about all those creative ideas we discussed. Visuals, stories, interactive elements.
What would make you excited to learn?
This is your chance to unleash your inner learning designer.
And remember, learning is a journey, not a destination.
It's about embracing the process, staying curious, and never stop growing.
So what are you waiting for?
Take what you've learned today and start designing your own learning adventure.
We can't wait to hear what you achieve.
And that wraps up our deep dive into effective training programs.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.